Mr. Speaker, I thank you because I do rise on a point of order to bring to your attention the fact that 1 year and 5 days ago, I rose in this House on the same issue on which I rise today, and that is fair and reasonable access for all Canadians to participate fully in the democratic processes of this great institution. Now, I'm referring, as you pointed out, to public paper and petitions that we as MPs receive from Canadians right across this country on a variety of topics. Now, Mr. Speaker, as Speaker Gaspard Fauteux said in 1947, and I quote, "All authorities agree that the right of petitioning Parliament for redress of grievances is acknowledged as a fundamental principle of the Constitution. It has been uninterruptedly exercised from very early times and has had a profound effect in determining the main forms of parliamentary procedure." Now, this was later echoed by the Honourable James McGrath in his third report of the Special Committee on Reform of the House of Commons, and I quote, "Public petitions addressed to the House of Commons constitute one of the most direct means of communication between the people and their Parliament. It is by this means that people can voice their concerns to the House on matters of public interest." Now, as you'll recall, I received a petition from constituents which was printed on paper that was 11 by 17 inches, or ledger size, and it was rejected by the Clerk of Petitions for not being on paper of the usual size, even though it had only been enlarged so that the constituents, the petitioners, could actually see what they were signing. But what exactly does usual size mean? Well, some people would interpret that as legal or letter-sized paper, which is exactly what was decided by the clerk's office. But usual size does not mean the same thing to all Canadians. As a matter of fact, this House has a history of accepting petitions printed on varying sizes of paper and getting those certified. On December 10th, 1974, Mr. John Roberts, Member of Parliament for St. Paul's, successfully tabled a petition in the House of Commons that was on a single piece of paper that was over 370 feet long, longer than a Canadian football field. Wow. Then on April 6, 1982, Mr. Bill Dom, MP for Peterborough, tabled a petition that was on paper 36 inches wide, 3.5 miles long, and weighed 247 pounds. In fact, it took all the pages and 4 MPs to carry it in. It included 135,327 signatures, making it the largest petition the Commons has ever received. Now, a few years later, the House underwent major reforms to the standing orders, and one section addressed was petitions. Prior to these reforms, petitions were first presented in the House, and it was up to the MP to make sure that they were in order. After tabling, the clerk would examine them to make sure that they complied and would report back, and that would be it. After the reforms, petitions were required to have a minimum of 25 signatures, valid signatures, be examined before tabling, and the government had to respond within 45 days. But, notably, there were no changes to the size requirements. Mr. Speaker, my last point of order on this matter is your own ruling, in which you stated, and I quote, "The House of Commons procedure and practice," at page 1166, states that only petitions printed on 21.5 centimeters by 28 centimeters, better known as 8.5 inches by 11 inches, or 21.5 centimeters by 35 centimeters, or 8.5 inches by 14 inches, sheets can be certified. Having said this, I can understand the member's frustration. Thus, I would suggest she raise the matter with the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, which could, if it sees fit, consider changing the requirements for petitions. But, Mr. Speaker, I dug a little bit deeper, and with the library's assistance, learned that at no time has this House of Commons ever defined the term usual size. It would appear that this is only an interpretation of a specific size requirement, and it comes from officials and not from the members of this House. As to the Standing Committee, Mr. Speaker, I did take your advice, and yet here we are over 1 year later, and nothing has changed. The Liberals could have agreed to change the standing order after I rose on my last point of order, but they didn't. The Liberals could have addressed this issue at Proc, but they didn't. The Liberals again could have addressed this issue after I raised it once more in my speech on C-81, but they didn't. So for a government that says it wants to make life easier for people living with disabilities, we're not seeing much action. Take, for example, Bill C-81, the Accessible Canada Act, in its current version. There are no timelines, and there's not even a coming into force date. Now, this would allow the government to pass the bill, and yet actually never do anything with it. Well, Mr. Speaker, we need to act now to make Canadians' lives better, because as the Minister of Accessibility said herself in her speech to this House on C-81, and I quote again, "We have to wait until individuals are denied a service, a job, a program, and then the system kicks in to determine if that denial was discriminatory. We literally have to wait until people are discriminated against before we can help them. These laws place the burden of advancing human rights on individuals." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, today I'm proud to rise on behalf of those individuals with a petition that was again rejected by the Clerk of Petitions because it was on legisized paper. Now, there are two special features to today's petition. First, each signatory has some degree of visual impairment, and that's why it's on the legisized paper. And it asks that the government amend the Standing Order 36 1.1c. The second interesting feature is that it was signed by almost 200 parliamentarians from all caucuses in both houses, all caucuses but one. I did invite members of the government side to join us and sign it, and I was very disappointed when they all refused. Now, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that this new research that I'm providing will help fix this unacceptable state of affairs. I know that no member of this House wants to make the lives of those living with disabilities any more burdensome, nor do they want to infringe on any Canadian's fundamental and constitutional rights. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I believe that if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for me to table this petition calling on the government to amend Standing Order 36 1.1c.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear.